Greetings, heretics, Xenos, and corpse worshippers. Today I'm going to cover the Necrons. First, my guest Occam the Untrue will talk briefly about who the Necrons are, and then I will get into the character details. Occam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hecatomb. The Necrons are soulless, robotic Xenos that have lain dormant in their tombs for longer than humans stood erect on Terra. Their existence predates even the Eldari. However, they were not always the soulless robots they are today. Once they were creatures of flesh and blood. More than 65 million years ago, during the Flesh Times, they were known as the Necrontyr. The sun of their birth world cursed them with short lives blighted by cancers and illness. However, even after departing their homeworld, they still bore the genetic curse bestowed on them by their birth star. Eventually, they encountered a race known as the Old Ones, who had mastered immortality. Keeping to a non-intervention policy when it came to dealing with other species, the Old Ones refused to help the Necrontyr. Incredibly jealous of the immortal Old Ones, the Necrontyr declared war. A war they could not have possibly hoped to win against the Old Ones, who were technologically far more superior. After suffering loss after loss, the Necrontyr eventually came into contact with the Catan, also known as the Star Gods. The Star Gods offered the Necrontyr immortality and freedom from the weaknesses of flesh. Zarek, the Silent King, accepted the offered gift of immortality for his people, and the process of biotransference began. The Necrontyr were stripped of their flesh and given bodies of metal and became the Necrons, and the Catan feasted on the souls of the Necrontyr. It was then that the Silent King realized his mistake. He had traded his soul and the souls of his people for physical immortality. The Necrontyr were no more. Armed with immortality and new, more advanced technology, the Necrons waged war with renewed vigor against the Old Ones. It is during this time that it is believed that the Old Ones nurtured warrior races to help them against the Necrons and the Catan. Among these races were the Eldari and the Quarks. The Quarks were predecessors to the Orcs. Eventually, the Silent King betrayed the Catan. Unable to completely destroy the Star Gods, the Necrons shattered them into thousands of shards, and imprisoned those shards inside Tesseract labyrinths. However, their victory over the Star Gods was costly, and greatly reduced the Necron forces. The Eldari began to turn the tides of the war. The Silent King ordered his people to withdraw from the war, and go into stasis slumber to be awakened millions of years later. The Necrons have now awakened. Their technology is well beyond anything the Adeptus Mechanicus can produce. They will seek to reclaim what was theirs, and to settle old grudges with the creations of the Old Ones.
Thank you. Now, let's review each character, see what sorts of roles they might fill within the meta, and how much you should invest in them if you're looking to maximize your efficiency of resources. During this section, I will also rank these characters in a few categories like survival, raid damage, and PvP damage. My ranking is out of the 67 characters currently released in the pre-Adeptus Mechanicus version of the game. My survival ranking is based off of health, armor, traits, and passive abilities. However, this doesn't fully capture all aspects of the game. My raid and PvP damage rankings are calculated using base damage, number of hits, crit modifiers, pierce ratio, and the average armor of a legendary raid boss or average armor of a character in PvP, as well as the Beast Slayer trait and whether or not the character is a psyker for raid boss psyker damage reduction. First of all the Necrons have the living metal trait. This makes it so that they count as mechanical, and they regenerate 10% of their max health at the start of each of their turns. The wording here is important, as the word used is regenerate and not heal. Healing can clear certain debuffs, like the neuroparasite from the neurothrope. The Necrons do not heal each turn, they regenerate. The stats listed in the following infographics are the stats of the character maxed out at Diamond 2, and the numbers shown for their abilities are those of the abilities at level 50. This is to give you an idea as to what the character will look like when they are fully upgraded. Makotep, a royal warden that I rank at 33 out of 67 for survival, 43 for PvP damage, and 47 for guild raid damage. Makotep is required for the Indomitus Mirror campaign and pairs well with Aleph Null. With an abnormally long range of 3, Makotep has low damage, and his active ability is only really good when used with Aleph Null's Summoned Scarab Swarms. His passive increases the movement of adjacent allies by 1 at the start of his turn. I would not advise pushing him much further than Silver 1, unless you're having difficulty with him surviving in the hard version of the Indomitus Mirror campaign. The community rates him as B tier. This, I believe, is at least in part due to his mobility buff. Mobility can be extremely important in PvP. Emospec, the Hexmark Destroyer. As a side note, destroyers are a subsect of Necron society that hate all organic life and seek to destroy it. They are typically shunned by most other Necrons. I rank Emospec at 55 of 67 for survival, 18 for PvP damage, and 34 for guild raid damage. His passive I would describe as a sort of multi-Overwatch. If he kills a target in Overwatch, he continues to Overwatch, but with one less shot. His active ability isn't really that amazing, but has some limited AoE damage potential. His limited range of 2 gives him less utility as an Overwatch character in PvP, but he's still excellent against multiple enemies in most other content in the game. His 6 attacks give him synergy with Eldryon, making him a decent early game choice for guild raids with Eldryon. The community ranks him as A tier. Aleph Null, a Canoptic Spider that I rank at 25th in survival, 37 for PvP damage, and 44 for guild raid damage. This character is amazing. Definitely one of the better summoners in the game. The Scarab Swarms that it summons have an active ability that, when triggered, causes them to replicate. If not taken care of quickly, this can get out of hand and swarm the enemy with near endless Scarab Swarms. Despite the Adeptus Mechanicus characters on the way, this character will likely continue to be one of the best mechanics in the game. Technically, Gibboscraps the Orc mechanic repairs more damage with his repair action, but Aleph Null can also repair an additional adjacent ally at the end of its movement each turn using its passive. This character is definitely worth investing in. He is rated as S tier by the community. Thutmose, the Plasmomancer, I rank at 50 for survival, 7 for PvP damage, and 26 for guild raid damage. His flying trait and high armor penetration give him some value in PvP, but he's incredibly squishy. His high piercing damage helps him get past most armor in PvP. While my formula ranks him at average for guild raid damage, he, like Certus, doesn't synergize well with the current meta. He isn't required for any campaigns, and despite how he ranks with my formulas, his abilities leave something to be desired, leaving his performance to be rather lackluster. The community rates him as D tier. I agree. Finally, Anophet the Overlord, ranking at 35 for survival, 42 for PvP damage, and 40 for guild raid damage. He's a decent summoner, but requires you to wait a few turns or let some of your living metal units die, in order to maximize its effectiveness. Aleph Null's Scarab Swarms have the living metal trait, and so they count for losses towards Anophet's summon ability. His damage is middle of the road, and his passive is kind of meh. The community rates him as B tier, and I guess I would agree.
If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, For every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle.